Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As the lead speaker on this side of the House on this motion, and as the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of the Liberal Party in South Australia, I rise to provide bipartisan support for the motion that has been placed before Parliament today. Throughout history, there are many different groups, ethnicities, faiths, people located in particular geographical locations through no fault of their own, just by the lottery of birth, who have been subject to persecution, who have been subject to attacks by others who may not agree with them or what they stand for, or how they ended up being where they were on this planet. But there can be no more persecuted group, in my assessment, than in modern times, and by modern times I mean in the last century or so, than the Jewish people. The Jewish people have done it exceptionally tough in the last century. And there are many people alive today, including my own father, and many people whose parents and grandparents in this chamber today, who could recall the Holocaust, when 6 million Jews lost their lives, because that is within the living memory of far too many people who are with us today. The Jewish people have been persecuted for millennia, to a greater or lesser extent, depending on what moment in history we are talking about. But in modern times, that persecution continues to exist. It continues to create great pain and great fear and trepidation amongst a race of people who choose to practice Judaism, their chosen faith. And that persecution was writ large a little over a week ago in Israel, in the Middle East, when the terrorists, and they were terrorists from Hamas, swept across the border and into Israel. We believe around 1,400 people lost their lives in those few hours following that invasion. It could be more, and that number could rise in the coming days and weeks and months. Well, it will inevitably rise as a consequence of the conflict which has now emerged. It is a terrible thing, and we condemn it. We condemn it through this motion, and we say very clearly that we stand with the Jewish people, particularly in Australia, but even more so in South Australia. Because in this chamber we represent South Australians. We represent all South Australians, no matter their race, no matter the religion that they practice. We represent them all. And we represent the Jewish community. It's a special thing to have representatives of the Jewish community join us this morning. Norm Schuler, a significant leader in the Jewish community in South Australia. We appreciate you being here, Norm. We know it's a difficult time for you and your community. And we thank you for the leadership and the compassion and the practical action that you have undertaken in recent days as you've sought to provide support and coordination to those in your community who have family and friends and connections within Israel, within that conflict zone. We also thank you for sitting down and praying with and for your community, both here and in Israel. So our thoughts are with the Jewish community here. But at a more macro level, our thoughts must also be with the people of Israel right now. The uncertainty which is hanging over that nation, the fear that is embedded within its people right now. And that does sit across both the Jewish people in Israel and the Palestinians that live in and around that nation, whether it be in Gaza, whether it be further afield. As the Premier said, we must grasp onto the humanity of this situation, and we must turn our minds to the innocent people who are caught up in this. Whether they are of Jewish background, whether they have an Islamic faith, whether they have got no faith at all but have found themselves in that part of the world at this time. There is an immense challenge and an immense fear shrouding potentially millions of people at the moment. Yes, we do hear calls for a proportionate response, but I think it's very difficult to quantify or describe what that level of proportionality looks like at this moment of time. And I don't want to turn my mind to that at the moment. Rather, I want to make it extremely clear that through this motion, this House seeks to, in a bipartisan fashion, condemn what happened little more than a week ago in Israel and make it abundantly clear that we are with our Jewish community at this time. It should be the case, perhaps it should be the logical case, that the real fear sits with the people who are geographically anchored in Israel at the moment. But unfortunately, because of the nature of this type of conflict, that has spilt over to other places. And I know that members of the Jewish community in Australia, hopefully not in South Australia, but certainly in Australia, have gone through pain and as a result of anti-Semitic slurs and a potential fear of attack in this nation. What we saw on the steps of the Sydney Opera House a week ago was the most grotesque behaviour that you would ever think to see in Australia. And I'm so grateful that we haven't seen that level of antagonism, that level of hate occur in South Australia. And long may we be a jurisdiction, long may we be a melting pot of faiths and cultures where, Norm, your community feel that you can walk down the street and worship in your synagogue and connect with your traditions, practice your customs without that fear. I think at this moment in time, because your Parliament is working hard to guard against that and to create a foundation of multiculturalism in this state through a range of mechanisms, I hope that at this moment in time you don't feel that fear. And if you do, that this Parliament, whether it's the Labour government or the Liberal opposition or independent members of this Parliament or other political parties, that we can come together and make sure that your community is protected and given the sense of belonging in this state. Because we are better than that. And this motion, but more broadly, this time, gives us an opportunity to reflect on the great things about this state and the fact that, again, in my heart of hearts, I hope that your community feels safe and secure in this great state. Like the Premier, I have had the great privilege of going to Israel. That was just on the cusp of the COVID-19 pandemic in February 2020. As South Australia's water minister, I was able to travel to Israel to look particularly at the incredible water innovation that occurs there. Israel is so well known for its innovation and entrepreneurialism across so many different sectors, water being one of them. One of the things that struck me when I went to Israel was the immense diversity of the nation and its relative size compared to Australia. It is a small place. I drove right around Israel in the best part of a day. From the Negev in the south, the desert lands, following the Dead Sea into the north, turning west at Jericho, and ascending into the hills around Jerusalem. Started off hot and a baking heat down in the south, to foggy and cold and drizzling when I arrived in Jerusalem. It's a country where around every corner there is a historic site stretching back to biblical times. It's a nation whose people are welcoming, who are steeped in tradition, and who have a real sense of purpose and place, geographical place in the world. It's a cosmopolitan place too. I stayed several nights in Tel Aviv, that Mediterranean city, looking towards the west, both physically and symbolically. A modern city, and a city with a great diversity of humanity gathering there. My brief 3-day visit to Israel just underscored the importance of that place to so many people, and the importance of leaders in places like this and across the Western world and beyond, making sure that we stand up for Israel and we speak out for Israel when bad things happen there. My other connection to Israel can be traced back to November 1995. November 1995 was when my mother chose to take my grandmother to the Holy Land for her 60th birthday. My grandmother, a committed Christian, wanted to go there and see those places of significance to her faith and to the faith of the Jewish people. November 1995, though, became an immense turning point for the history, the modern history of Israel, because my mother and grandmother were in Tel Aviv when an extremist Israeli pulled out a weapon and killed Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Prime Minister Rabin was working exceptionally hard to create a two-state solution and to bring his people together. It was a difficult task, but he was making progress. And on that evening of the 4th of November 1995, when my mum and grandmother were just around the corner, he fell to the ground. In February 2020, I had the opportunity to visit the spot where Prime Minister Rabin was killed. It was a very, very difficult time for my family in 1995, when my grandmother and mother were trapped in Tel Aviv, unable to leave their hotel. The fear that we had back there in rural Scotland was real. It's nowhere near the extent of the fear and the sadness that the Jewish community in South Australia are experiencing today. But I do have that little connection, that geographical understanding of the fear that can be inflicted on a community when something goes wrong there. To the Jewish community in South Australia, please be assured that the party that I lead will be your voice. We will be a calm voice. We will be a reassuring voice. But when need be, we will be a loud voice for the Jewish community and the people of Israel. This is a hard time for the Jewish community. It may get harder. We hope it gets easier. But the uncertainty that shrouds Jewish people around the world, including here in Australia and South Australia, is real, and it's likely growing at the moment. And in supporting this motion, my message is abundantly clear. We are with you.